Thank you for inviting me to this event today. Thank you especially to Dr. Harris Astic for including me, and to Dr. Vladimir Thomas for putting my name in to join you today. Just before I get rolling, I want to let all the high school students know that at the end of the day you're getting a gift that we had made specially for you that has a message on the bottom to hopefully remind you of the message that I hope to share with you today. We're here to talk today about building resiliency in children and families. Resiliency is one of the recent buzzwords. Resiliency, for lack of a better explanation, means getting the job done despite the barriers against you. Resiliency, the skill of bouncing back from hard times, from a difficult moment, from a disappointment. How do we build resiliency? Actually, I wonder, is resiliency something that can be taught? Maybe it is best modeled, inspired, transferred from one to another in the form of shared stories, shared resources, shared faith, and mutual determination. Maybe it is possible to teach resiliency in those instances when someone just gets a lower grade on a test, they got a B when they wanted an A, or they struck out at the plate and need to be encouraged to try again. Buck up and get back on that horse, don't give up. Maybe it's easier to help someone bounce back and be resilient in those situations. But what about the presence or absence of resiliency in the midst of other deeper, more personal struggles? What about when there isn't enough money? Or when there is just one parent in the home or no parent in the home? When living in foster care or a victim of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse? Or living with family alcoholism or drug dependence? Struggling with one's own substance use, isolation and rejection by peers or family due to sexual or gender identity? Gang affiliation, domestic violence, hunger, homelessness, evictions, fire, trauma of any kind, like a car accident or a devastating loss. Are we talking here about resiliency or miracle making? Sometimes it can feel as though bouncing back were more of a slamming oneself against a wall with no give, no support, no idea, no chance, no bounce, just that wall. Like a voice in your head that gets louder and louder and more convincing over time. Voices like, it's your fault, don't talk about it, don't trust anyone, and you are not worth it. Those voices tell a story, but what we do not realize is that we can quiet the ones that do not serve us and give new language to the ones that can push us forward. Bounce back? Not so easy sometimes. Life and resiliency is not as simple as pushing harder on an exam or getting back up to bat. No. Life is bigger than a single moment. Life is our story. There's a quote that says, we're all the heroes of our own stories. Raise your hand if you think that is harder than it sounds. Because sometimes it is. My father was a musician. He worked late nights every weekend. The weddings, parties, and events where he played were venues for free drink. Scotch, whiskey, martinis, bourbon, beer, rum, didn't matter. Alcohol flowed freely, making the late work night move along with greater ease, and made his return home move along with great dis-ease. 2 a.m. on a Friday or Saturday night was his time to wake up my brother and me, demanding that we clean our rooms. If they were not messy already, he would swoop an arm across the dresser top, pull items from the closet, and one time, he flipped my brother's mattress only a second after he had gotten up, still bleary-eyed from sleep. Weekend mornings, sometimes he insisted we each fill a leaf bag of our belongings, faulted for the mess he claimed we had made. My brother and I would do as we were told, and when he left for work, we would go back out for the bags. Then we would put our toys back where we got them from, then fill the bags with crumpled paper bags, maybe a brick, some rocks, and the slightest hint of something sticking out that looked like a toy. A voice in my head told me, don't tell anyone about this. Don't talk. Critical thinking, we hear that a lot in education, teaching students to be critical thinkers. Well, it was critical that I think. It was a matter of survival. Perhaps some of you can understand that, while others of you cannot. Another survival tactic, as I got older, what became worse, and think about, oh, there should be a parent in the home to help you with your homework. I had a parent in my home to help me with my homework, but it was torture. Night after night, with the most difficult subject I had, mathematics. Someone mentioned algebra before. I struggled horribly with math. And my father thought that that was what we needed to spend every evening on, hour after hour after hour. If I got it wrong, maybe I got hit in the back of the head. Maybe I got told I was stupid. Didn't matter if there was a tear. Didn't matter at all. And then I learned not to cry. And then I learned to be smart. Then I learned that during class, geometry, whatever math subject it was at the time, to watch the examples on the board, watch the answers, bring those home, and say that was my homework. So I learned, when Dad said, time to do homework, let's see what you got, I'd say, I finished it, here it is. He'd look, he'd check the answers, and look at me like, And what I appreciated about being able to do that was that I no longer had to sit there next to him and hear the ice cubes clanking into the glass, smelling the alcohol on his breath, and being there, and I didn't want to be. Still today, sometimes I twinge a little at the sound of ice in a glass. But during that time, even though I got crafty, there was this voice in the back of my head that would say, I am not worth it. I'm never going to be able to do this. My report card in math was often a D. And back then, in the old days, report cards were done on like carbon paper. Maybe you guys don't know what carbon paper is. They would write on it, and then there was like, some of you know what I'm talking about. But what I learned, again, critical thinking, was how easy it was to turn a D into a B. What I learned was, if you take just a little bit of nail polish remover and put it on there and it smudges a little, you can write over it, turn the D into a B, then put a little more nail polish remover on it, and no one would know the difference. So here Dad thought his homework was really helping me while I was still getting that D. So, yeah, critical thinking. So, in high school, although I was a horrible student, I was fortunately a big reader. I credit any little scrap of intelligence I have even now on the fact that I read every single fiction novel I could get my hands on. I actually got thrown out of a couple of classes for reading in class. Think about that. Sometimes I would write my own stories, pretending to take notes, and I got detention more than a few times for that as well. One day I went into my high school guidance counselor's office. And this is very ironic considering that I'm the executive director of guidance and school counseling now, so listen to this. I went into my high school counselor's office one day and said, what is this SAT exam? Because back in the day, they didn't really talk about it like they do now. What is this SAT exam? Somebody told me I had to take an SAT exam in order to apply for college. And my guidance counselor looked at me and said, wait a minute. And she opened the drawer to her desk and she pulled out a pamphlet. And she said, you're not college material. You need discipline. And she handed me a pamphlet that said, be all that you can be. Join the army. And the voice in my head at that time was saying, you're a waste of other people's time and you are not worth it. But I did end up applying to college. I applied to one college. I don't recommend that, okay? I applied to one college, and if it wasn't for Concordia College in Bronxville, this very small Christian campus in Bronxville, New York, that most people have never heard of, I would not be here today. But getting in college is not the end of the story. Don't let anyone fool you with that. It's not the brass ring, the trophy prize, but it is an avenue to get there. While we're on the subject, let me just say, I've met a lot of stupid people with college educations. But they were smart enough to do the work to go get it. They were smart enough to show up no matter what. And it is difficult. It is work day after day. If you are anything like I was, you will ask yourself more than once a day during that process, is this worth it? Is this worth it, getting up early in the morning, staying up late, struggling, reading, giving up parties, giving up some fun sometimes? Is it worth it? But what that really translates into is, am I worth it? Every time you ask it, is this worth it? You're really saying, am I worth it? I had very little study skills when I went to school. I did not know how to take adequate class notes. I didn't know how to take an exam. I didn't really know how to read an assignment that wasn't a novel. I didn't know how to communicate very well outside of making jokes or looking away before anyone had a chance to start a conversation or get to know me. Those voices in my head, don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, I am not worth it. Going to college was like wanting to play basketball and needing to learn to play basketball, but instead of being taught how to make a shot at the foul line with both hands, it was like being mid-court, being asked to shoot with one hand. It was not easy. As an undergraduate social work student, two things challenged me in those courses. One was the Who Am I paper. Do they still make you do that, social work students? Yeah. Who Am I paper? This is starting to sound like one of those, right? And the other thing was class presentations. Having to stand up and talk in front of people. I would get sweat under my armpits. It looked like the color of my shirt. It was horrible. The walls around me would literally shake. It was very difficult for me. But was it resilience that kept me going? Maybe. But it was also asking for help, taking second chances, seeking opportunities, making connections, and finding my passion and my passions. What I felt was important, what I was learning that I enjoyed. It was self-discovery as much as academic. The knowing of my love of reading and writing stories and embracing that passion eventually led me to publish a young adult novel about a teenager growing up with an alcoholic father. I was quieting that voice in my head and teaching it a new language. So let's fast forward to today. I'm no longer afraid of class presentations. I mean, look at me. I'm standing here with all of you, only a little bit of sweat. I'm not going to ask you to test that theory, but trust me. And I'm still a little nervous. I still have to fight that voice a little bit, even today. But every new occasion, every new challenge is an opportunity for those voices inside to yell and to try and discourage me. And sometimes I still have to shut it down. And I have to answer that not only am I worth it, but so are you. As that negative voice of doubt dims and is replaced with more supportive ones, you recognize your strengths. You realize that you know more than you think, and you discover that resiliency in those darkest of circumstances sometimes comes later. Not in the very moment of failure, disappointment, crisis, or turmoil, but sometimes later. Through time and time again of saying you are worth it, even when you do not believe it yet. Resiliency shows up in your life when you realize you can take your troubles, your struggles, your hurts, and talk, trust, and feel for the benefit of others. Perhaps many of the social workers in this room understand that. High school students look around and see those social work students. That's a group of resilient people using their own personal paths to pave a way for others. The quote I read earlier, we're all heroes of our own stories, well, there was a line before that I left out. It goes, nobody is the villain in their own story. No one ever has to be. Although sometimes we are the loudest voice of opposition in our heads. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, you're not worth it. Self-attacks born of the effects of outside forces left unattended, given way too much power. Take that power back. If you think at all you have forfeited it. That is resiliency. Resiliency is becoming the loudest voice of affection, kindness to yourself when times are hard. It is the self-talk that inspires instead of disheartens. In closing, I feel that it is important to note that now in my later adult years, my father is the one who asks most often than anyone else, how am I? How's work going? He shows off my business card around to anyone who's willing to look. And he listens more intently to me now than he ever did before. He's my biggest fan. No, wait. No. No. I am my biggest fan. I am worth it, and so are you.